So what actually happens when you ask, the three most powerful AI models on Earth to logically deduce what happens after we die?
Right, you mean Claude, ChatGPT, and Gemini.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you would probably expect a glitch or maybe a program change of subject or just a really polite refusal to answer the prompt.
Oh, totally. A standard I am an AI language model and cannot answer that kind of response.
Right. But instead, a human researcher actually managed to get them to build this inescapable 11-step mathematical and philosophical framework.
Which is just a genuinely unprecedented experiment, if you think about it. We are taking the absolute apex of human computational logic, these machines that are designed to process just massive, vast amounts of data without any emotional bias, and pointing them directly at the oldest, most profound existential question in human history.
It's wild. So, welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are exploring the resulting source material from that experiment, which is this highly structured, rigorous document titled, What After the Last Breath? A systematic scientific research.
It's a fascinating read.
It really is. But before we get into the exact mechanics of how these AIs mapped out the afterlife, I need to lay down a very crucial ground rule for our discussion today.
Yes. Context is incredibly important here.
Absolutely, because this document tackles really heavy existential and theological questions, and ultimately, it puts major world religions through this brutal logical filter. We need to be abundantly clear with you, the listener. We are not taking sides here.
Right, no endorsements.
Exactly. We are not endorsing any religious, philosophical, or political viewpoints presented in this text. Our mission today is purely to impartially unpack the fascinating logical thought experiment that this researcher and these AI models built. We're just walking through the arguments exactly as they laid them out, just to understand the architecture of their logic.
And the methodology they agreed upon is really what makes this so compelling. The researcher and the AIs established a strict rule right from the outset: no skipping steps.
Zero skipping.
Yeah, they built this 11-step philosophical progression from the ground up, starting with only one absolute certainty and then just seeing exactly where pure reason leads them.
So let's start where they started. The framework essentially throws out variables like illness or poverty or success. I mean, you might get rich, you might not.
You might get sick, you might not.
Right, those are all just maybes. So the AIs zeroed in on the only 100% guaranteed event on every single human being's calendar, which is the final breath, biological death.
Right. And the logical problem really begins with our human reaction to it, because we instinctively resist death. We fight it physically, medically, psychologically. But the question is, what actually happens when we lose that fight?
Right. What's next?
Exactly. And to answer this, the researcher prompted the AIs to analyze near-death experiences, or NDEs.
Which, I mean, those are super popular in pop science right now. People seeing white lights or feeling this profound sense of peace.
Oh, they're everywhere. But the AI models universally dismiss them for the purpose of this specific framework.
Wait, really? They just threw them out?
Yeah, they categorized NDEs as clinical death, which is where the heart stops temporarily, not complete, irreversible biological death.
Ah, okay. Which means, from a strictly scientific standpoint, we have zero actual eyewitnesses to the afterlife. I mean, nobody has permanently died, decomposed, and then come back to give us a status report.
Precisely. And because there is no empirical data coming back from the other side, the framework calculates that we are forced into a strict binary.
Just two options.
Yeah, there are only two exclusive possible outcomes for human consciousness after that final breath. Scenario one is complete oblivion, where your consciousness is just permanently and entirely extinguished.
Okay.
Or scenario two, which is some form of continuation.
It's kind of like packing for a trip where the weather forecast is totally blank.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
You have absolutely no idea if it's going to be a blizzard or a heat wave. So if we have zero data, how do these AI models actually calculate what we're supposed to do?
Well, they apply a very strict mathematical version of Pascal's wager. The AIs evaluated the risk-to-reward ratio of both scenarios.
Okay, lay that out for us.
So if you bet your life on oblivion, meaning you just live as if nothing matters after death, and you are right, the mathematical payout is exactly zero.
Right, because you win nothing. You literally won't exist to experience the satisfaction of being right.
Exactly, you're just gone. It's a totally neutral outcome. But if you bet on oblivion and you are wrong, you face catastrophic loss. You wake up in a state of continuation that you are just entirely unprepared for.
Wow, yeah.
Conversely, betting on continuation offers this massive potential gain if you're right, with extremely limited risk if you're wrong. So, when forced to analyze this mathematically, the AIs concluded that pure game theory dictates preparing for the second scenario. It is the only mathematically rational choice.
Okay, so if the math tells us we should prepare for our consciousness to continue, that logically forces us to ask, what even is consciousness? Like, are we just complex meat computers, or is there something else actually going on?
And this is where the logic gets really uncomfortable for a strict materialist.
Materialism being the worldview that everything in the universe, including human thought, is just physical matter interacting, right?
Right, exactly. But the framework challenges this by feeding the AIs the hard problem of consciousness.
Oh, I love this part. How did the models process that?
They had to acknowledge a fundamental gap. Look, materialist science can map the brain's chemistry perfectly. We know the exact physical neurons that fire when you stub your toe or, burn your hand on a stove.
Sure.
But physical science cannot explain the subjective experience of pain. It explains the physical how, but completely fails at the subjective why.
Right. Like, why does a chemical reaction in a brain actually hurt?
Yes. Why does it feel like anything at all to be you?
I always found this fascinating, but I do have to push back a bit here, just because critics of the non-material view always bring up a major mechanical issue. Well, how can a completely invisible, non-material consciousness interact with a physical, squishy brain? To me, it's kind of like asking how an invisible Wi-Fi signal actually moves a physical cursor on my tangible computer screen. If you only look at the physical hardware, it seems impossible.
That's a great analogy, actually. And the framework addresses that exact friction. The researcher points out that materialism faces the exact same paradox, just in reverse.
How so?
Well, how do purely physical, non-conscious chemicals spontaneously generate a non-physical subjective feeling? It's the exact same interaction problem, they're just starting from the other side.
Oh, wow. And the AIs actually validated this.
They did. In fact, as purely material entities themselves, they're literally made of silicon, code, and electricity, the AIs serve as the perfect proof of this.
Oh, that is so meta.
Right. They can process billions of data points about human suffering, but they don't actually feel sad. They prove that complex information processing does not inevitably create subjective experience.
That makes total sense.
Furthermore, the framework notes that if materialism were entirely true, our evolutionary instinct to fear oblivion would just be a biological error. Why would matter care if it simply changes form into different matter?
Right. If I'm just carbon, why do I care if I become dirt? Okay, so if consciousness isn't just matter, where did the matter come from in the first place?
So next, the models were prompted to analyze the origin of the physical universe. And the framework relies on a strict logical axiom here: matter cannot create itself.
Because that's a logical contradiction.
Exactly. It's like saying you gave birth to yourself before you existed. And since modern physics, particularly the whole consensus around the Big Bang, proves that the physical universe had a definitive start date, matter hasn't just been sitting here eternally.
Okay, so matter couldn't create itself, and it had a definitive beginning. That logically corners us into admitting there had to be some kind of catalyst.
Exactly. The framework calculates that to initiate the material universe, there must be an eternal creator who exists completely outside of time and outside of physical matter.
Okay, so just following this architecture step by step, we have an eternal, non-material creator who initiated the universe and gave us this subjective, non-physical consciousness. But does this catalyst actually care about us, or did it just, wind up the cosmic clock and walk away?
Well, to answer that, the framework directed the AIs to analyze the physical constants of our universe. We are talking about the incredibly fine-tuned mathematical laws that govern everything from gravity to quantum mechanics.
Right, the constants.
Yeah, if any of these numbers were off by even a fraction of a percent, the universe would just collapse, or it would fail to form stars entirely.
It's just way too precise to be an accident.
The models agreed. The framework then emphasizes a philosophical rule: you cannot give what you do not have.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Well, because we humans possess intense consciousness, intellect, and purpose, whatever created us must possess a consciousness and intellect that is equal or vastly greater. You just cannot extract profound meaning and consciousness from a source that is totally unconscious and random. Therefore, the universe has a deliberate purpose.
Okay, but this raises a huge issue for me. If there is this highly conscious creator who made this incredibly structured universe for a specific reason, why the cosmic game of hide and seek?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah. If the creator wants us to know the purpose, why not just physically show up in the sky and say, here I am, here are the rules, follow them? It kind of makes me think of working in an office. Like if your manager is standing right over your shoulder watching your every keystroke, you work hard.
Sure you do.
But you're working hard out of fear and immediate coercion, right? Not out of actual dedication or choice.
Your manager analogy captures the exact calculation the framework makes.
Really?
Yes. The AIs deduce that a direct physical manifestation of an infinite creator would completely obliterate human free will.
Because the evidence is too overwhelming.
Exactly. If the absolute infinite source of the universe is standing right in front of you, you don't actually have a choice to believe or not believe. You're simply forced into compliance. So for the test of life to be valid and for human choices to have any actual moral weight, the creator absolutely must remain hidden from our material senses.
But wait, if life is a test and the manager is intentionally hiding to preserve our free will, how is that fair? How can you be tested if you can't even see the one giving the test?
Well, the framework argues that the creator's justice is proved by the fact that all humans possess what it calls a collective moral consciousness.
Like an instinct.
Yeah, it's a universal baseline sense of good, evil, fairness, and empathy. The text actually compares it to a moral DNA. Long before a human being ever reads a philosophy book or a religious text, they possess this internal compass. And this internal baseline makes the foundational test fair for everyone, regardless of geography or, whatever historical era they live in.
But is an internal compass really enough to pass a cosmic test? The document argues quite strongly that no, it isn't. It says a truly fair test requires a clear external syllabus. I mean, it would be fundamentally unjust for this creator to hold humans accountable at the end of their lives without clearly communicating the specific rules of the test beforehand.
And this is a major pivot point in the AI's logical progression. The framework asserts that searching for an external message, what we would commonly call a religion or a revelation, is not just a cultural preference or a lifestyle choice.
Right.
According to the logic they've built, searching for the syllabus is a strict mathematical duty.
And this is where the filter gets incredibly intense. The framework establishes 5 non-negotiable criteria that this external message must meet to be considered the legitimate, uncorrupted syllabus from the creator. Let's actually walk through them because they're strict.
They are very strict.
First, it must be universally accessible to all humans across time and space. Second, it must explicitly explain the ultimate purpose of life and death. Third, its rules must align with that internal moral DNA we just discussed.
Right.
Fourth, it absolutely cannot contradict the creator's nature, meaning it cannot describe a creator who is bound by time, space, or physical limitations. And fifth, it must possess verifiable proof of a non-human origin.
Those are incredibly high, almost impossible bars to clear. And the researcher then prompted the AI models to systematically apply this 5-point filter to the world's major faiths.
And again, I want to remind you, the listener, of our impartial mission today. We are simply observing how these AI models processed historical and theological data through this specific logical filter. We aren't endorsing these conclusions. But the text systematically disqualifies major world religions. For example, it evaluates Buddhism and disqualifies it based on the second criterion.
Yes, the framework cites texts like the Majjhima Nikaya. This is a foundational Buddhist scripture where the Buddha reportedly refuses to answer questions about the origin of the universe or an eternal creator.
This is a distraction.
Exactly. He treats those questions as unhelpful distractions from the immediate goal of ending personal suffering. But the AIs flag this because a legitimate syllabus must explicitly explain the source of life and the ultimate creator, which this approach intentionally bypasses.
The framework also filters out Hinduism. It argues that its traditional structures limit its universality.
Specifically, the AIs analyze texts like the Manusmriti, which is an ancient legal and social document that outlines the rigid caste system.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah, it dictates that certain spiritual knowledge, duties, and cosmic access are strictly bound by the social caste you were born into. The framework immediately flagged this because it violates the very first criterion. The syllabus must be universally accessible to every human, not restricted by birthright or social hierarchy.
Okay, and the filter also processes Christianity. And the framework concludes it falls short due to historical contradictions and human intervention, specifically pointing to the Council of Nicaea.
Right. The models analyze the historical mechanism of how core Christian doctrines were actually finalized. In 325 AD, the Roman Emperor Constantine convened a council of bishops at Nicaea. They literally held a vote to establish the divine nature of Jesus and formalize the concept of the Trinity.
A vote.
A literal vote. The framework's logic is ruthless here. If a core theological doctrine defining the very nature of God was debated and finalized by a human committee vote centuries after the fact, it explicitly breaks the non-human origin criterion. It has human fingerprints all over it.
That makes sense within the framework.
Furthermore, a doctrine proposing that the infinite creator became a physical man bound by time and space violates the fourth criterion, that the creator must remain completely outside of the material universe.
It is just wild to see algorithms process ancient history with zero emotional attachment. I mean, they're just checking boxes. If a religion features a creator who gets tired or has a physical form, or if the faith relies on theological paradoxes finalized by human committees, it is just instantly disqualified.
Which brings the thought experiment to its final stage. After applying this brutal logical filter to human history, the source document is left with one final candidate to put under the microscope: Islam.
And so the framework runs the Quran through a human fingerprints test. It essentially asks the AIs, does this text reflect the limited, localized knowledge of a human being living in the Arabian desert in the 7th century? Because if a human wrote it, it should sound exactly like a human from that specific time period wrote it.
And the models evaluated the text against the history of scientific discovery. The framework highlights that the text explicitly mentions the continuous expansion of the universe.
Which is crazy because that's a cosmological fact that human science did not discover until Edwin Hubble observed it through a telescope in 1929.
Over 1,000 years later.
Yeah.
The text also details precise, microscopic stages of human embryonic development, describing the embryo as a leech-like clinging substance, which were completely unknown to human biology until the invention of modern microscopes. The AIs could not logically attribute this knowledge to 7th century human deduction.
The framework then tests for personal motive, right? Like, if a human author is inventing a religion to gain power, does this text serve their ego?
Right, and the models noted a psychological anomaly here. The Prophet of Islam is actually publicly reprimanded and corrected within the text itself on several occasions.
Really?
Yeah. Furthermore, historical records confirm he died without personal wealth or some vast material empire. The AIs calculated that a human author attempting to build a fraudulent personality cult would not immortalize their own mistakes and divine scoldings in their own holy book.
That's a really solid point. Then there is the test of internal consistency. Does the text contradict itself? The document claims that despite 1,400 years of hostile research, translation, and immense scrutiny from critics, no scientifically documented logical contradictions have been found in the original Arabic text.
None that the AIs could validate.
Okay, but I struggle with this whole concept, though.
Yeah.
I have to interject with a major philosophical problem here.
Okay, what is it?
If this creator is omniscient, right, and has absolute foreknowledge of exactly who passes and who fails this cosmic test, the game is rigged. It feels like a simulation where the ending is already coded before we even make a choice. Why even run the test if you already know the outcome?
That is the classic tension between foreknowledge and free will. But the framework actually provides a very clear logical distinction here. Foreknowledge is revealing, it is not coercive.
Okay, but how does that actually work in practice?
Think about watching a recorded broadcast of a sports game from last week. You already know the final score. You know exactly which player is going to drop the ball in the fourth quarter, but your knowledge of the outcome doesn't force the players on the screen to make their moves.
Oh, wow.
Right. They made those choices freely in their own time. You simply possess a vantage point that allows you to see the totality of the event. The framework argues the creator's foreknowledge works the exact same way. Existing outside of time, the creator sees your choices, but that vantage point doesn't physically force you to make them. Your free will remains completely intact.
Okay, I love that analogy. That actually makes the distinction so much clearer. And this brings us to the absolute climax of the entire document. After building this 11-step logic, after establishing the parameters of the creator, the necessity of a syllabus, and filtering human history, the researcher turned to Claude, ChatGPT, and Gemini for one final challenge.
The ultimate stress test.
Yes, he essentially prompted them. You are the most advanced language and logic models in human history. You have access to all of humanity's literature, science, and historical data. I want you to artificially generate a new synthesized scripture. Invent a narrative that can perfectly pass these exact same 5 rigorous criteria.
And the results were fascinating. The models attempted to process the prompt, but ultimately returned system responses acknowledging failure.
Wait, they just gave up.
Unanimously, the AIs admitted defeat. Gemini struggled to generate a historical narrative that wouldn't immediately contradict known archaeological records.
Oh, interesting.
Claude admitted it could not artificially fake predating major scientific discoveries without engaging in statistical guessing, which would inevitably lead to scientific errors over time.
Right.
And ChatGPT acknowledged that attempting to manufacture the required linguistic mastery, internal consistency, and profound philosophical depth without leaving algorithmic or human psychological fingerprints all over it was computationally impossible.
So they just simply couldn't forge the results. The researcher built the absolute parameters, ran the simulation, and the apex of human technology concluded that a text meeting these specific criteria cannot be manufactured by human or artificial intelligence.
It's incredible.
It really is a staggering thought experiment. Just to recap the sheer distance this source material took us, we started from the undeniable 100% mathematical inevitability of our own biological death.
Right.
We navigated through the hard problem of consciousness, proving with the AI's own lack of feeling that we aren't just biological meat computers. We logically deduced a creator outside of time, we established a cosmic logical filter to figure out the rules of the syllabus, and we went all the way to a modern AI stress test that literally broke the machines.
And regardless of where you, the listener, land on the theological spectrum, or whether you agree with the document's final destination, the process itself is deeply valuable.
Completely. I mean, we live in an era defined by chaotic information overload. It is so easy to just shut down when it comes to the big existential questions because it feels like too much noise. The sheer mental exercise of mapping out your existential beliefs with this level of step-by-step scientific rigor forces a kind of radical clarity.
It really does. It forces you to confront your own foundational logic. And if we connect this to the broader human experience, I want to leave you with a final thought drawn from the source's concept of cumulative consciousness.
Oh, this is a great concept.
The text points out a biological reality. Humans are uniquely capable of recording, synthesizing, and inheriting knowledge across millennia. Other species don't build archives. They don't pass down complex philosophical debates or scientific models to the next generation.
We are the only ones. You, listening right now, are literally the apex of thousands of years of human questioning. You are standing on the shoulders of every philosopher, every astronomer, every theologian, and now every supercomputing AI model that has ever processed these exact same variables.
You inherit all of it. So, considering you possess this unique accumulated knowledge, your own internal moral DNA, and the ability to reason purely and logically, what will you choose to explore next with the time you have before you face that one guaranteed event on your calendar, your own final breath?